Well, Monkey fans, we have a special treat today. It's not often you get to have a conversation with somebody who took part in creating something that was a big part of your childhood, but today we get to do just that. Today I sat down for an interview with Bryan Walker of Retro Studios back in the GameCube and Wii era. We got to talk about Donkey Kong Country Returns, gaming in general, and his experiences with some of the gaming legends such as Shigeru Miyamoto and Satoru Iwata. Hope you enjoy the interview. Well, we have a special treat today. Thank you very much, Bryan, for joining us. Today we have Bryan Walker, the Senior Director of Development at Retro Studios from 2003 to 2012. You had a hand in bringing to market a few of Nintendo's big games during that period, such as Donkey Kong Country Returns, Mario Kart 7, and Metroid Prime 2 and 3. For those like myself who may be unfamiliar, I was wondering, what does a position like that look like? What kind of aspects of game development would you have been responsible for?
I was really responsible for orchestrating the efforts of our key teams, what we call verticals in the game development industry, art, audio, design, engineering, and so forth. And then the sub disciplines under those, such as rigging, concept art, character art, environmental art, and so forth. The leads of those teams reported into me. And when I say reported, that makes it sound like very top down, but it was actually, it's best to say, regardless of what the org chart looked like, I supported them and the teams by coordinating their schedules, their outputs, making sure that our dependency tracking was robust, that we didn't get any surprises as one thing slipped and another thing was affected by that. But also establishing the kind of the fundamental rhythms and disciplines, the boring stuff of a big game project.
Very nice. Thank you very much. The one game that I was especially interested in asking you about was Donkey Kong Country Returns. I know in some other interviews you stated that was one of your highlights of working at Retro. And it sounds like there was a desire at Retro to work on Donkey Kong. I was wondering, where did that desire to work on Donkey Kong specifically come from?
Well, does anybody not want to work on Donkey Kong? I mean, it is such an endearing IP, and it's a game, a type of game that any developer can feel good about working on. It's wholesome, it's family oriented, but it's a lot of fun. It's very interesting. When we were really starting to gear up the project, one of our engineers, I think it was Ryan Cornelius at the time, he provided a video of him as a youngster in the early 90s on Christmas Day, opening up a gift and finding the original Donkey Kong Country cartridge in there. It was just adorable. But it's just that kind of game. And a lot of developers, I'm sorry to say, will work their entire careers without being able to work on something that is just top down that enjoyable to be part of.
For you, like before you had this opportunity came up for you guys to work on a Donkey Kong game, what was your experience with the franchise? Had you been familiar with the trilogy on SNES?
Yes, yeah, and going way back to the original arcade debut of the character Donkey Kong, I distinctly remember walking into the arcade and hearing a new sound effect in the background, and that sound effect was what was Mario at the time, walking across the girders and seeing the big ape himself in his coming out party. Of course, he was a somewhat different character, looked and his representation in the game was different. But yeah, I go way back with my familiarity with the character and the IP.
That has to be a very exciting but also very nerve-wracking thing to be taking on such a big IP as Donkey Kong.
It was quite a challenge, but it was just one of these celestial convergences where the team we had the talent, we had the tool set, we had the creativity, and we just needed to get the thumbs up from Mr. Iwata to move forward with that IP, and we were able to grabbed that opportunity, and we embraced the day. I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, and along with what you're saying there, I was curious how that kind of came to be. As far as, was there a list of franchises that Nintendo was looking to sort of revitalize, or was that what kind of conversation started there?
If there was, it was happening at levels above us, as we were really kind of winding down Prime 2. Were really thinking about what other Nintendo IPs would be available to us and what we could do with them. And we went through the whole list of especially IPs that hadn't seen daylight in a while. And we had originally approached Mr. Iwata about taking on a Donkey Kong game, but the emergence of the need for a game like Prime 3 on the Wii to address a specific market and provide demonstrations of what the Wii controller would look like with in the first person type of gameplay, that emerged as the key priority for us. So we went through the Prime 3 development, and then were fortunately able to pick up Donkey Kong after we shipped Prime 3.
What other franchises were kind of up for consideration there that you guys were looking into?
One that I was particularly interested in just from its flight aspect, and that was Kid Icarus. And we were doing some just spitballing around the water cooler, really. It never got to even a preliminary pitch or proposal. But it was just one that had captured my imagination, and several other people were interested in seeing what we could do with that IP. But frankly, I think DK was a better overall fit, and it was certainly a very successful game for us.
That's really interesting because with Masaru Sakurai ending up going on and doing that himself, revitalizing that must have been on their minds as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the amazing things about working for Nintendo is they have such a massive stable of IPs that are beloved by players, have been for 50 years. So having such a wealth of material to work with as a developer is just a fantastic experience.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's awesome. For Donkey Kong, when you were working on that or getting started working on that, I was wondering, was there a conversation of how much to bring back from those games? Because obviously, like you said, those games are very beloved to a lot of people, but at the same time, I know you guys wanted to create something new.
We really kind of kicked off the project by sitting down for about 3 full days at our desks and just playing the first three, on the original SNES versions. And we beat on them a lot. And it was kind of interesting as I was playing through. One of the first thoughts I have were, I remember playing the original back in the early 90s, and then I'm playing the original in the, late 2Ks. And I'm thinking, I remember this game being better for some reason. And that, it in some aspects, it didn't age as well as I thought it might. And that is because of state of the art of platforming, especially with things, like the Mario versions that we started to see with the N64. The state of the art and the standards had just risen so high that the early platformers from back in the day, a lot of people have fond memories, but they really didn't compare to the evolution of the genre. But that was part of the challenge, is that we were not competing against a standard that was set in the early 90s. We were competing against the standards of the current day, augmented by the fond memories of kids opening their Donkey Kong Country cartridges on Christmas Day and everything that represented to them at the time. It's easy to surpass an older game from the standpoint of really the full spectrum: production values, fun factor, replayability. It's much harder to surpass the memories of those games.
Absolutely. Yeah, very true. When you guys had started playing through those games, was there anything in particular that you wanted to change or do differently from those games?
Really, the movement needed to be much more fluid. and we were looking at making the game feel better. And that's a theme that Mr. Miyamoto is constantly referring to is how does the actual interface, the player's input reflected in the game, how does that feel? Even though you don't really feel the ledges and the jumps, you're imagining feeling those, and how does that convey to what the player is actually doing in the game, the control set and or the character package as we call it. And in playing the old game, it was a very straightforward, nothing fancy movement set. And we knew that with a character as powerful as DK is supposed to be and as fast and as versatile, that there was a lot of territory that the original games never touched upon that we could build on with Returns.
And that is one thing that, going back and just thinking about playing Returns compared to Country, that I really do appreciate about Returns. It's so satisfying to play. Like stomping on the enemies, all of the attacks that DK has, just the fluidity of the movement. It's is really it's hard to compare.
That's a testament to how closely our different disciplines within the studio were working together with the engineers and their creation of the dynamics system that we were using, with the designers and their ability to lay out the environments and design the characters and enemies to feel good. And then, of course, the enemies themselves, they had to be satisfying as antagonists. They had to represent additional aspects of the movement, jumping on them and so forth, that would really come together in a synthesis that made the overall experience better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are things that people don't think about often when they're playing games. But even like the shapes of the heads of the enemies, you notice is perfect for jumping, and the sound design just goes along perfectly with it.
Yeah, yeah, and I still call out Quinn Smith, who was, I think we could say he was really the creator of the concept of the tiki characters and the instrumental nature of these characters. Obviously, if you see a tiki enemy shaped like a drum, you want to beat on top of the drum. You want to jump on the top of the drum. Quinn, who was still a relative junior in the studio at the time, he'd only been with us a few years, and he came to us as an intern from Digipen. That was really his coming out party as to the talent that he could bring to bear. It was really remarkable seeing him as well as other interns such as Sean Horton and Ilya Nazarov. They came to us from Digipen. They just turned out to be really heavy hitters.
Nice, that's awesome. Going along with what you're talking about with the enemies, that was actually the one thing that I wanted to reach out to you about originally, because of a quote that I had read online that you had given, and I think it speaks to a misconception that goes on a lot in the DK fan community of the idea that Nintendo was against having the Kremlings come back from the Donkey Kong Country games. I was wondering if you could in a way clear that up a little bit.
We were never given any direction from Nintendo to that point. I think we embraced the new creature, the new enemy formats, one, because of the gameplay that they represented. They also, by introducing new creatures, new enemies into the game, it gave our art and our designers a much broader palette to work with. They could really flex their muscle with new opportunities rather than bringing back kind of the old art style and the old creatures from the original. We really wanted to grow the IP, not just iterate, not just copy what had been done before.
Yeah, that makes sense totally. Another thing that I'd seen that you'd commented on in another interview is that when you started working on this game, that you had started to go in a sort of a darker direction. That the art style was aligning more with Metroid than maybe Donkey Kong.
Our early passes were definitely the environment art team in particular shaking off the moody aesthetics of the Prime series, which of course they had done an absolutely fantastic job with the Prime series and work that still stands up anywhere today. but this was a different beast entirely, no pun intended. So it fortunately the of course in early passes are always hit the floor early and often, but these first passes, the environment art team really thanks a lot to people such as Vince Jolie, who was the art director at the time, but we also had people like Will Bate, who was very experienced, and they were able to help guide and grow the art team in general, from the concept art through the environment artists, to embrace the silliness, the whimsy of the character and the environments, and make the individual elements such as the trees and so forth reflect something that is an impossible area to create. It doesn't have to be realistic, but it is still an area that we would love to be in ourselves.
Yeah, I think when I've talked to other fans of Donkey Kong, they latch onto that as like, what would that have looked like? That it sounds like a very interesting concept, a darker, grittier Donkey Kong game that some
But
people may
we
want to see someday. But
what one of our artists came in one time very early in the process and asked me, what if Donkey Kong was evil? And so
well, he
I
was.
he was at one time, but yeah, he was thinking of like Dark Donkey Kong, and
Mhm.
yeah, we're like, so I playfully threw him out of my office.
That's
Out,
funny.
don't come back.
Now, I was wondering if any of that inspiration carried over to the sort of silhouette levels that are in Donkey Kong Country, or where the inspiration for that came from.
That came from one of our environment artists, Matt Manchester, who really did it up as a quick demo. And I think that just represents one, the talent of Matt, but also the support that he was getting from Vince and the other environment artists, and the unconstrained creativity of the team to come up with an aesthetic that directly led into gameplay. That's, some of the mega corporations and the huge teams, the lanes are very clearly assigned. Environment art, here's what we need from you. Stay in your lane. Designers, here's what we need from you. Stay in your lane. We had such a healthy amount of crossover of ideas. Sometimes it got spirited. Sometimes people disagree, but that's completely okay in this kind of environment. But the cross-pollination of creativity across the verticals was super encouraging. I really think it improved the quality of our products a great deal.
Yeah, I look to levels like that in video games as like some of my favorites because whenever that you do something artistic with it that is just different from everything else, and I always enjoyed those levels.
Yeah, Matt also had a great Wolverine costume for one Halloween. I remember, like he definitely exuded creativity. He's one of these people that you talk to for 5 minutes, you realize that you're breathing air that most people aren't qualified to inhale.
Nice, nice. Speaking of people whose breath you don't feel worthy to inhale, I wanted to ask you a bit about Mr. Miyamoto and Mr. Iwata, as those are two individuals that I have an incredible amount of respect for. Was there any interactions that you had with them that had a special impact on you personally or professionally?
Yeah, I'm going to get a little misty in recalling some of these because these are legendary individuals that didn't just meander their way into that legendary status. They earned it day to day in interactions and in product and in what they said and how they supported the development teams. I distinctly remember sitting at an E3. We were in the Nintendo booth, sitting in back, talking to Mr. Tanabe and Risa Tabata about how Prime 3 was demoing, and it had been well received, we're very happy to say. And I see our partners across the table from them. They stiffened a little bit, and we turned over our shoulder, and there was Mr. Iwata, who was just standing there, listening to the conversation, and he personally thanked very sincerely Mark Pacini and I for the hard work that we had put into the demo for Prime 3. And I had just come from other organizations, big publishers, that their CEOs would not give you the time of day. They had no idea who you are, what you worked on. They were more worried about their tea time than the actual efforts of the developers. And to see Mr. Iwata was a developer at heart, and he understood the hard work that it takes to make anything in the games industry, not to mention anything that's actually good. That's just one indication of the quality of individual he was. We had the good opportunity of multiple discussions in the hospital, the headquarters in Kyoto that they refer to, the Nintendo headquarters, with Mr. Iwata and Mr. Miyamoto. And at each time, they were nothing but supportive, nothing but supportive. They provided good, actionable feedback and advice. I really remember Mr. Miyamoto playing our demos, and we are starstruck. When Mr. Miyamoto is sitting there 6 inches from the screen looking at individual pixels to make sure that the alignments of the perch behavior of DK or the jumps, the blowing behavior that he suggested to us. And, that is nirvana for a game developer to be evaluated and validated by somebody like that. Everything he said had merit. It wasn't, I think we could sell 2 million more copies if we did this, or marketing wants us to do this, or we have this co-branding opportunity with this, so you should do this. It was, here are the minute actionable details as developers that I suggest to you to make this game better. When that's coming from somebody like Mr. Iwata, Mr. Miyamoto, you listen. And we did. And the game was better as a direct result of their guidance and support. Yeah, it's, losing Mr. Iwata was a real blow to the industry as a whole, but to me personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he had a big impact on a lot of people. I mean, even myself, as somebody who has no connection to it necessarily, just enjoying the games and realizing that this is a guy who had a huge hand in like a big part of my childhood.
Yeah.
Um, it was a loss, and I think you can feel that.
Mhm.
you know. Can you think of a time where, other than what you've mentioned, where something was said, some piece of advice was given that kind of changed your perspective on how to make games?
Mr. Miyamoto, of course, he's worked on 3 billion games over the course of his career. So he playfully said this, and then we started realizing he's right. It's that your demo level, your planned first level is always going to wind up being the third level. It's going to prove to be too hard for beginning players especially after you mature your player package. And it will be the third level, and you'll have an entirely different first level. And I'll be darned if he wasn't dead on about not only just about every game we worked on at Retro, but every game I've worked on outside of Retro has been about the same. It's been about the same.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I think sometimes you make in Mario Maker levels, you keep playing them over and over to the point where you've gotten so used to it that you feel like I need to make this harder.
Yeah, yeah, and that was a real issue, I think, in the platformers of the early '90s when you started seeing games, especially from developers like Psygnosis. I mean, the games were great, but man, they started hard and then really started piling it on after that. They were really into the difficulty levels. So being able to develop a game that engages the full suite of player skills and from the initial onset through the very end is quite an art form. And Mr. Miyamoto is the master of that art form.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for me as a big Nintendo fan, I'm always curious to hear any behind the scenes details of how these games come to be. I know Nintendo is a company that's very invested in the quality of their games, and I'm curious how much involvement did they have in development when working with a studio like Retro? Like, what kind of relationship of the creative process between Nintendo and Retro? What did that look like from day to day?
We had quite our Venn diagram as far as creative ownership of our games with our partners in Japan. This was the SPD3 team with Mr. Tanabe and Risa. There was a huge amount of back and forth, huge amount. They had their strengths, we had ours. And sometimes we butted heads about feature sets, storylines, progression, and so forth. But I think at the end of the day, Mr. Tanabe's vision for boss designs in particular, which is just fantastic. He's just so good at taking what our designers initially put forth and then massaging, putting the polish in, the intervals of attacks, the progression, the timing. Yeah, I think he's one of the best in the business, if not the best in the business at that. So it was truly a partnership. And I'm not saying this because right now partnership means, yeah, we work with the publishers and they tell us what marketing wants and we do it, blah, blah, blah. That's absolutely not the way the relationship worked with them during that time.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about is, I'm passionate about looking at video games as an art form. Whether that's the actual way a game is presented visually or audially, or down to the more psychological experience of how does that, what experience do you want the player to have? What is your perspective on that, and what project throughout your career as a developer have you been the most proud of as a piece of art?
On Prime 3, when we were demonstrating that game during E3, was it Prime 3? No, it was Prime 2, actually. One of the booth representatives, really cool young lady that was, manning our booth for us. She was playing Prime 2 and getting stuck. And I was just watching her play. There was an area in the demo, and the demo was still, relatively unpolished. There was an area in the demo that was frustrating her, and I didn't offer help deliberately. And so I show back up get onto the show floor the next day, and I'm there in the booth an hour early, and they're starting to trickle in. And she comes in and makes a beeline over to the kiosk and starts playing again. And I'm like, hey, Caitlin, how's it going? And she's like, okay, I thought about this a lot last night, and I think I have the solution now. I think I know what to do. Bingo. That's exactly what we want. We wanted players in the Prime series to be challenged, maybe a little frustrated, maybe, okay, I'm rage quitting, I'm walking, I'm never touching this game again. But then picking up the next day, like, oh, okay, that's what they wanted to do. Now I get it. Now I get it. And having that kind of cumulative back and forth of challenge and a little frustration with kind of the exultant feeling of solving a problem or developing your skills to where you overcome that situation. With DK, I was super flattered. I did not know her at the time, but we were showing that game on the floor, another young lady came up and was playing DK a lot. She kept coming back, kept coming back. And finally, she wrapped up and said, the music, I really like the music and I really like how the sound is helping reinforce the gameplay. And well, I thought that was a cool observation because usually at E3, you can't hear yourself think on those floors. And I thought that was a really cool observation. And she wound up coming back a couple of times to play more. But finally, one of the other folks in the booth said, "You know who that is, right?" I'm like, "No." Who it's like a young lady that likes Donkey Kong. So like that's Lindsey Stirling. And yeah, I had no idea that it was such an accomplished uh, musician and performer that was noticing the fine details of the audio work that Scott Peterson at Retro had put into the game. I don't know if I've actually passed that story along to Scott. I need to do that, but I think it was super cool that Lindsey was, she's got gaming chops. She's legit. But such a talented artist was observing and appreciating the work of another artist.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I think it goes to show with Donkey Kong in particular and Donkey Kong Country Returns as well. The series has music at its core. I
Hmm.
think since the very beginning, it's like the startup of Cranky Kong with the DJ thing. It makes you want to start dancing. But I do appreciate how that game incorporated that into the actual gameplay, which I don't think had been done a whole lot up to that point. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was Super Nintendo World opening. and the Donkey Kong Land opening. I'm sure you've noticed is very heavily, almost completely inspired by Retro's take on the franchise. How does that feel to have your work be literally brought to life in that way?
Well, it's not my work. It's the work of a massively talented group of artists who combined to create a vision. I was just kind of the guy sitting in the corner, goggle-eyed, just mind blown by the amount of talent that these people could bring to bear. No, that's yeah, I'm super flattered, but I'm flattered and honored for this group of artists. It's not my work. I struggle with stick figures.
But yeah, I think that it's really cool to see those things be brought to life, and kind of the things from my childhood just becoming a reality.
It's kind of interesting. There's so many fans that reach out about our work there. And when they start making references, my childhood, I was 30 years old at the first CES when Nintendo was debuting Donkey Kong Country. And yeah, so, yeah, that puts the whole my childhood comment in a different context.
For me, I was probably 10 or 11 years old when Donkey Kong Country Returns came out. So it was a big part of my childhood. And in fact, yeah, just in general, I want to say thank you for your work on that, because it's something that one of the only games of my childhood that kind of brought my family together, because it
Yeah.
was something that my dad was very into the Donkey Kong Country games. I was playing everything on the Wii, and it was just that convergence of people who had grown up with these things, and now I was growing up with it.
It's interesting that you bring that up because that really was kind of the justification fundamentally of the feature that we put in for Diddy Kong to ride on Donkey Kong's back. That way, when mom or dad, who were big fans of the original, wanted to play the game with their children could join in a meaningful way, firing the peanut gun from the back of Donkey Kong as the old pros, the parents who grinded all those levels in the original navigated through the game. And that's something when we talked to Reggie about it. In fact, that was something that he was particularly excited about as well.
Yeah, in my house it was a bit of an argument of who got to play as Diddy Kong, because everybody wanted to use the jetpack.
Yeah. It harkens back to such a special time in the industry and for so many fans during their early experience in the games, with those type of games, and that things were simpler, things were more wholesome, things were brighter and upbeat and fun. Donkey Kong was a big gorilla wearing a tie trying to get his bananas back. That's what it boiled down to. We didn't have to water it down with $50 million worth of cinematics where people are desperately pressing A to continue. We were really privileged to be able to focus on just the gameplay, really.
The thing that stands out to me the most is the relationship with some of these developers that you've had a relationship with working at Retro. Is there any other experiences that you had with them that meant a lot to you?
One of the things that Mr. Tanabe and Risa would tell us half jokingly was the artist must suffer, and making a game, just a game, is hard. Making a good game is incredibly hard, and making a good, successful game it frankly, full stop, is excruciating. It is a ton of hard work, long hours, and hard decisions. At the end of the day, fantastic ideas are just, getting pruned left and right. To stay on mission, to keep the focus. That is something that a lot of people don't realize about the industry. The industry has matured a lot. Processes have gotten better. The tools have gotten a lot better. It's much more of an assembly line now, not in a bad way, but it's a much more quantifiable effort now. But there is still the reality that so many times the artists have to suffer to some degree. So that has stuck with me. It's not like I ever go around to other projects and say, okay, we're not having enough pain. Let's get some more pain. And it's, okay, we need to work, 90 hours this week. Let's get to it, just for the pain. But it is, whatever the level of pain and how it manifests itself, just the creative process to do something really special takes a lot out of an individual. And so I just ask your fans to, especially when there's a temptation to look at a new game and to jump all over it because it didn't do this or didn't do that, or there's a million things it should have done that it didn't do. Those developers put a huge amount of themselves into that product. So understand that fun of the final product often doesn't reflect the amount of pain and suffering that the dev team put in.
Yeah, give them some slack. No, yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. I think people don't think about that too often as far as all the things that go into it. At least as far as an art form, I think of, there's people that make movies, there's people that make songs, there's all these different types of art, but it's like you have to do all of it in a game because it's an experience that you control, that you're kind of living. And all of these things have to come together to create something that, an experience. And I think it's probably one of the most difficult art forms out there.
There's so many different disciplines involved, and trying to keep everybody aligned to the fundamental goal of the project without knifing each other is a balancing act sometimes. It's creative differences are healthy and they are important to the overall product, but they can require a level of professionalism and discipline out of developers now that wasn't required 30, 40 years ago at all. The teams were much smaller, the stakes were much lower. You could sell 50,000 units and be profitable and be successful. Now, a AAA game has to move 6 or 7 million units to break even, just to break even. And stakeholders aren't investing their money just to break even.
So is that something that you dealt with a lot, with people kind of being at each other's throats creatively?
Very, very rarely, very rarely. As talented and as passionate as the team was, I'm surprised at how few dust-ups we really had. How very, very few. These were people who really operated with respect and with resourcefulness. If the designers wanted a feature from the engineers and the engineers couldn't give them that feature verbatim, there was a great level of collaboration back and forth about, let's be resourceful. How can we achieve those goals without 3 months of development time instead of 1 month of development time? Those kinds of conversations go on in game projects on a daily basis. And it's a testament to the teams that can operate with respect and operate collaboratively, that they're the ones that come out with the great games, where the teams that are constantly squabbling over creative ownership, those are the teams that will struggle, and the projects will struggle.
Very nice. Well, I really appreciate you sharing all these things with us today. One more question, quick one. Who's your favorite member of the Kong family?
I got to go with the big guy. I mean, I'm old school. I'm the one that walked into the arcade and saw him standing in a bunch of girders, beating his chest. So that's my I'm saying OG.
So Cranky Kong.
Just because I'm 62 years old and gray hair doesn't mean I'm a fan of Cranky Kong's over the big guy.
Well, thank you very much, Bryan. I really appreciate you taking the time out today to talk with me. I have a lot of respect for what you've done in the game industry, and it's really cool to hear your firsthand experiences with some of the real true greats out there.
I was just a guy sitting in the corner looking stupid as these brilliant developers were making the magic. This is theirs, not mine.
Thank you very much for watching my interview with Bryan Walker, and thank you, Bryan, very much for joining me on the channel. Subscribe for more gaming and Nintendo-related content, and hopefully more interviews like this in the future. Bye-bye.